welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, and today I'm pleased to have as my guest Oliver St. Clair Franklin, President and CEO of the International House in Philadelphia. The International House provides housing for foreign university students and sponsors programs that link Philadelphia and the world community. Oliver Franklin, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you so much, Paul.
I want to start by saying that I lived in the International House in New York City when I was a graduate student at Columbia many years ago, more years ago than I want to say. It was one of the great experiences of my life. I made friends that I still have. And I wanted you to start, perhaps, address the whole notion of this International House movement or program as it exists in the United States.
Well, I think, Paula, you're a perfect example of it. Someone who has lived in International House, remembers it very vividly, has lifelong friends.
Right.
That's what the whole purpose of the movement is. But it's a very typical Philadelphia story. The first International House is ours.
Really?
Founded in Philadelphia in 1910. And in 1923, the Rockefellers got involved, and they built international houses in New York, Chicago, Berkeley, and Tokyo. And now there are 17 houses on 4 continents. A few weeks ago, I was in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, for the international meeting of iHouse directors. And essentially, it is the opportunity for students from all over the world to come to a country, to live amongst themselves, and also to have people from that country living in the house to introduce them to the culture. And it's really students and scholars. Half of the International House residents in Philadelphia are graduate students. The other half are undergraduate students.
Okay.
And they're from 60 countries. So it really is a living global village, what we're all trying to get to be at some point in the future.
So there were 60 countries represented at the
60 countries right now. It could be 58 next year or 65. It varies. But so many people with so many different perspectives, coming from so many different places in one place to live together.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Well, excuse me. I know for my part that it was because I had been abroad for a year that I was eligible to live in the International House. Is that how it works for Americans?
Well, typically, the average American that lives, and we have 15% Americans, come under several categories. Some were raised abroad, sons and daughters of missionaries, diplomats, international corporate people. Some have spent time abroad, and some are very interesting. We find a new group of Americans who want to study certain languages. We have a lot of Japanese students and Korean students, and we have people living there who want to speak Japanese and Korean on weekends. So they use that as an opportunity.
So there needs to be a reason. There needs to be some rationale for this outreach.
Because you have to apply. I mean, you just can't say, gee, I'm going to go over and live at an International House. You have to apply. You have to state your case, why you want to live there, because International House is not for everyone. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be willing to hear a point of view that's new, as well as a point of view that you may not agree with. Most important, you have to have the ability to listen to the other person. So that's what makes it kind of interesting.
Well, you say in some of the literature that's put out by the International House that you want people to learn to be good global citizens when they come there. You want to explain a little bit what that means? I guess the ability to listen is part of that.
I think most Americans believe that America is the easiest country in the world to get used to, primarily because we have so many people that want to come here. We also have so many people from outside of America who are very successful here. So the average American feels, come to America. Coming to America as an international student is as difficult in terms of getting adjusted to the culture as the average student would be, say, going to Chad in West Africa, say to the University of Timbuktu, and trying to get adjusted there as well. So what we do is we say that when you come to International House, you're coming to a place where every culture is recognized. The dominant culture is clearly the U.S. culture because we happen to be living there. And we do all sorts of programs, leadership. What does it mean to be a leader today? In today's world, you will work in teams that you don't choose. And you may have a person from Japan in that team, someone from Iran in that team, someone from Argentina in that team, someone from Australia, and someone from the States. And for you to be successful moving forward in the world, you are going to have to learn how to function with people with a different perspective.
So there are these exercises, if you will, that are set up for people from different countries to work together?
For instance, a perfect example of a global community is a classroom. You will have a classroom where people come from cultures where they wait before they answer a question. So you may have a class where you'll have someone from Japan or Korea, and the teacher is saying, you know, what's the capital of the United States? The average American blurts right out, Washington. The average Korean or Japanese, out of respect for the teacher, would wait before they answered the question. And so what happens in the classroom is you have these international kids in class. You have an American way of teaching, which is totally alien to the way most of these students have learned a classroom. And you find a lot of international students have a tough time speaking up.
And how do you help them
We
learn?
train them.
Okay.
You have to sit them down and tell them it's okay to look your teacher in the eye. In some cultures, the teacher is so high in terms of the status that you show respect by not looking at him. It's like me talking to you and not looking at you. If the average American, average person looking at me, not looking at you, would think there was something wrong with our communication. We tell them also that it's okay to jump up and get in front of someone. Because in a lot of cultures, it's impolite to jump in front, whether it's answering a question, whether it's waiting to talk to the professor after class. So we try to teach them how you function in an American classroom. By the same token, a lot of American professors need to be sensitized to the fact that they do have a global classroom in universities. And they've got to be sensitive to the different cultures in order to bring out the best in those students.
Okay.
So we provide a leadership training. We have to teach a lot of people how you do an interview in America. I mean, the average person from China who's finishing Drexel and wants to stay here for 2 years because there's a special visa, will then begin to go out and interview in this community. And how do you conduct yourself? What do you say? How do you look a person straight in the eye? How do you tell that person, you can trust me? You know I'm smart. You see my grades. But how do you get that person to want you to be a part of that person's team? Which is what's really
Well, that's
happening.
fascinating. I wonder if you've heard of any byproducts of this when the students go back to their native countries and bring some of these newly learned behaviors.
We hope two things are happening. We hope that our society is beginning to adjust and learn something from these international students. And we certainly hope that when they go back to their countries, they become the best ambassadors for Philadelphia. And we look at every resident as a future ambassador for Philadelphia. And whether that means they go back and send their children here or their sisters and brothers here, or whether they go back and get businesses and do joint ventures with firms here, we look upon every resident as a future ambassador.
Well, I want to talk more about the joint venture idea, but before we do, I wonder if you could tell me more about these interactions that you must see every day. I imagine that there must be tensions and conflicts that crop up when you have people from such diverse backgrounds coming together, living together in close proximity. Could you tell me a little bit about some of these and how you resolve them?
Well, the first thing is people live in suites, 10 people to a suite. And everyone has a room, but everyone has a common kitchen, a common bathroom, and a common living room. So already you've raised the tension level because people have to truly live together, and International House Philadelphia is designed to do that. Well, in every suite, there's a person that's a resident advisor. And that person is probably an international person, and they are trained specifically in intercultural communication and intercultural conflict. So if there's a problem, for instance, I ran across a gentleman from Vienna who's a marvelous young man. He looked sort of depressed, and I said, come on up, let's talk. And I discovered that he didn't like the smell of the kitchen that some of the residents cooked and loved because it was a different culture. And he felt that he couldn't get to sleep at night because these smells were around. And I didn't ask, where they were cooking from. So what we do is we call up, I don't, but our resident advisors call a meeting and say, John has an issue with the smell. Well, the first thing, let's talk about what's in the food. Let's talk about why it smells the way it smells. Let's talk about what it tastes like. And then, after we sensitize that person to the smell and the taste, let's figure out maybe we need to cook earlier. Because in your culture, you may start at 9 p.m. If you go to Brazil, for instance.
Yes, I've been there. Very late. You get up very late, too.
You don't even start ordering till 10.
Right.
Okay? So then you've got to come to a compromise. This gentleman can't sleep because the smells are going too long. Maybe instead of cooking our meals at 10 at night, and they weren't Brazilians, by the way, so I'm not, because that I wouldn't say. But maybe we should move it up to 8, so that by 11, when this person wants to go to sleep, the smells. Maybe we've got to spray it, but we work on. And of course, if it doesn't work, we will obviously move the person.
But that's interesting. So on the one hand, perhaps if he understands what's going on with the food, he won't mind the smell. Right. On the other, perhaps there's the accommodation on the other end.
Most people get anxiety or uncomfortable in a cultural situation when they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
They don't have a clue. And we also try to encourage people to really taste everybody's food. McDonald's may be one sort of cuisine, but where you find that what really attracts people to International House is the fact they can cook. Most foreign students hate American food. It takes some 2 to 3 years to get adjusted because it's bland.
Yeah.
It's bland. If you come from a society where spices are really a key ingredient of your palate, and you go out to an average restaurant in Philadelphia, no matter how good, it's going to be pretty bland. So, it's really an adjustment first, just starting on the...
So there must be wonderful odors in the International.
Oh, it's fantastic.
If you go around dinner time, you can really dip into...
It's truly fantastic.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying here. It sounds like you're in this position to be able to see what can be done, to be tried about it, to promote world peace.
Right.
In other words, you really do have a bird's eye view, in a sense. What works? What doesn't work? Can you generalize? Can you tell me what it is you think that really is at the core of conflict between and among peoples, and what is at the core of resolving them?
Okay. Well, I spent my career in the investment business, so I'm not a, quote, professional academic type. And I took this job 2 years ago because it seemed kind of fascinating to experience it. And the one thing that has happened to me, besides being very pleased, is that I'm very optimistic about the future. I look at my colleagues who are retired who don't have contact, and they're thinking, oh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And I say, no. The future is very, very bright. Now, the conflicts, most of the conflicts, say, at a place like International House, comes because of the personal identity of the person. That person has an identity, and we purposely put people in places that'll challenge that identity. A person that smells of food they don't like has an identity that says, I can't get with that food. How will I even think about it? So the first thing we try to get people to understand is that every culture is valuable.